We all seek comfort. We all look for a place to rest our heads after a long day of travel. In our modern world, we have found a new way to do this. We open an app on our phones. We scroll through listings of charming houses, cozy apartments. We book a stay in someone else's home. It's a simple transaction, a promise of a temporary sanctuary, a home away from home. We pack our bags with excitement, dreaming of the new experiences that await us. We trust the smiling profile pictures, the glowing reviews. We believe in the safety of this shared economy. The idea is seductive, isn't it? For a few days or a few weeks, we can pretend to live another life. We can wake up in a new city, brew coffee in a stranger's kitchen, look out a window onto an unfamiliar street. The appeal lies in the authenticity, the chance to step outside the sterile environment of a hotel into a space with character and history. We imagine ourselves fitting seamlessly into this new setting. It's a fantasy of belonging, even if only for a short while. But there is a catch. There is always a catch. When we step across the threshold of a stranger's home, we are also stepping into their world. We are surrounded by their belongings, their memories, their secrets. The walls around us have seen things we can only guess at. They have absorbed the echoes of lives lived within them, the joys and the sorrows. Every creak of the floorboards, every rattle of a window pane is a reminder that we are merely visitors. We are temporary occupants in a space with a past that we know nothing about, a past that might not be ready to let us in. And that is where the comfort can begin to curdle into something else entirely. What happens when the promise of a peaceful retreat shatters? What happens when the home you've rented doesn't want you there? The stories we tell ourselves about safety and trust are just that, stories. Behind the curated photos, the carefully worded descriptions, a different reality can be waiting. A reality that is darker, more unsettling, and far more dangerous than we could ever imagine. A home away from home can quickly become a place you'll do anything to escape. Think about the last time you stayed somewhere new, that feeling you get on the first night. You lie in an unfamiliar bed, listening to the house settle around you. The sounds are all wrong. The hum of the refrigerator is a different pitch. The wind whispers through the trees outside. Every little noise seems amplified in the darkness. You tell yourself it's just your imagination. You tell yourself you are perfectly safe. You close your eyes and try to force the unease away. But what if it isn't just your imagination? What if those strange sounds are more than the house settling? What if the feeling of being watched isn't just a trick of the mind? We place an incredible amount of trust in strangers. We trust the host who gives us the keys. We trust the nameless, faceless people who wrote the positive reviews online. We trust that the space is ours alone for the duration of our stay. The truth is, we never really know what happens behind closed doors. We don't know the history of the land the house was built on. We don't know the stories of the people who lived and died within its walls. We don't know what secrets are hidden just out of sight. The smiling host who greeted you at the door could be hiding anything. That friendly welcome might be a performance, a carefully constructed mask, a truth that waits for the sun to go down. So here is the question that will keep you awake tonight. When you turn off the lights in your next rented room and you're wrapped in the suffocating silence of a stranger's house, how can you be sure you are truly alone? The stories you're about to hear are not fiction. They are chilling accounts of people who, just like you, booked a place to stay. They sought comfort and adventure. But what they found instead was a nightmare they would never forget. They discovered that sometimes the most terrifying monster is the one who holds the key. It was supposed to be a romantic escape for a young couple, Mark and Clara. They had been working too hard, caught in the relentless grind of city life. They craved silence. They yearned for a place where the only sounds were the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds. After weeks of searching, they found it. A secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods, hours away from any major city. The online photos showed a charming rustic interior, a large stone fireplace, wide windows looking out into a sea of green. Their arrival was everything they had hoped for. The air was crisp and clean. The cabin itself was even more beautiful than the pictures suggested. As the sun began to set on their first day, they settled in for the evening. Mark built a fire. Clara prepared a simple dinner. Everything felt right. The cabin was solid and secure, a fortress against the dark woods. Later that night on the sofa, listening to the crackle of the fire, Clara noticed something odd. A detail so small she almost dismissed it. She pictured the floor plan in her head. The living room, the kitchen, the single bedroom, the bathroom, a simple layout. But something didn't quite add up. The exterior dimensions seemed too large for the interior they'd seen. There was a section of the house unaccounted for. The bedroom was at the back of the cabin, and its far wall felt wrong. It was a long, unbroken stretch of wood paneling. They started by knocking on the wall, listening for any change in the sound. But then, near the corner of the room, the sound changed. It became higher, more resonant. It was the distinct sound of a hollow space. They began to examine the wood paneling more closely, and then they found it. A faint, almost invisible rectangular outline. It was expertly concealed. It was a door that had been deliberately hidden from view. There was no handle, no knob, no visible hinges. The romantic atmosphere of the cabin began to evaporate, replaced by a growing sense of dread. He retrieved a thin-bladed knife from the kitchen. Carefully he slid it into the thin crack and began to gently pry it open. Slowly, painstakingly, they managed to open the door just a crack. The air that seeped out from the crack was stale and cold. It carried a musty, unpleasant smell, like earth and decay. The light cut through the blackness, revealing a small, windowless room. Nothing inside but a single rickety wooden chair in the center. It was deeply unsettling, more cell than storage. The flashlight scanned every inch. Scratches on the stone walls appeared, long, desperate marks, like fingernails. Their blood ran cold. This was a place of suffering. The cozy cabin felt like a trap. Just as they reached to shut the door, they heard it. A sound. Faint, barely audible, unmistakable. From the corner where the beam couldn't reach, a soft, rhythmic scratching. Panic seized them. They slammed the hidden door shut. The scratching stopped the instant the door closed. As they nervously tied it up, Clara noticed something. On the mantelpiece sat a small, ornate iron key. There was no visible keyhole on the hidden door, yet the key's presence felt deeply significant. Were they meant to lock something in, or was the key there to let something out? Our next story begins with a woman named Chloe. She was an artist, a painter. She rented a small, stylish apartment in the historic district of a bustling European city. It was a solo trip. Chloe arrived on a grey, drizzling afternoon, retrieved the key from a lockbox, let herself into the building. The apartment was just as advertised. She was delighted, unpacked her art supplies. This would be her sanctuary for 2 weeks. The first few days were blissful. Chloe fell into a comfortable routine. She felt productive and inspired. But on the 4th night, something shifted. Chloe was working late when she first heard it, a soft, scraping sound coming from inside the walls. She paused, brush in hand, listened intently. It stopped. She dismissed it as the building's old plumbing, or maybe a rodent. But her focus was broken. The sounds continued the next night. It was more like a soft, rhythmic tapping. It came from the wall right behind her headboard. She held her breath, straining to listen in the darkness. That night the sound was different yet again. It was a low, whispering murmur, coming from the ventilation grate near the floor. She sent a message to the host. His reply was swift and dismissive. He said no other guest had ever complained about anything. That night she couldn't bring herself to go to bed. The whispering started just after midnight. She turned on the hot water for a shower, letting the small room fill with steam. As the steam clouded the mirror, she saw something that made her heart stop. The condensation was forming around letters. As the mirror fogged up completely, the message became crystal clear. "I see you!" The main door was still locked from the inside. The windows were all closed and locked. There was no way anyone could have gotten in or out. The realization was suffocating. Whoever wrote that message, they might still be here. They were coming from inside her rented space. She fled the apartment. She stood on the cobblestone street, looking up at the window of the apartment. It looked so normal. But she knew the truth. She was being watched from within those very walls. Chloe immediately contacted Airbnb and the police. Eventually, the host, Jakob, was called to the scene. He explained that they had found nothing out of the ordinary. The message on the mirror had vanished as the steam dissipated. However, the officer did mention something. A small, locked maintenance hatch in the back of the bedroom closet, a hatch Jakob claimed he had never opened. A few months later, another traveller posted a review online. The review was quickly taken down. She had been sharing that small apartment with someone. An unseen roommate living in the dark, narrow spaces between the walls, a lonely hidden watcher who just wanted her to know she wasn't alone. Our third story takes us to a modern, minimalist loft in a bustling North American metropolis. The guest was a young man named Alex. He was a digital nomad, his laptop his only constant companion. He let himself in with a code. The apartment was exactly as described. It was sterile, impersonal and clean. For Alex, this was ideal. He was looking for a blank slate, a temporary base of operations where he could work without distraction. For the first week, everything was normal. Alex worked long hours, preferring the solitude and focus it provided. On the 8th day of his stay in the loft, the messages stopped. But when another day passed with no response, a knot of anxiety began to tighten in her stomach. This was not like him. He never went silent. Frustrated and terrified, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She booked the first flight she could get. She reread Alex's last text message over and over again. At the time, she had assumed it was just a typical complaint. Now, The words seemed ominous. They opened the door and entered the loft. The scene inside was deeply unsettling. The apartment was pristine, almost untouched. Alex's laptop was sitting on the desk. His wallet and his keys were next to it. Everything he owned was there. But Alex was gone. He had vanished into thin air, leaving all of his possessions behind. The building's security cameras showed Alex entering the building on the day he arrived, but they never showed him leaving. She refused to give up. She took his computer, hoping to find some clue. She hired a cybersecurity expert. The expert made a chilling discovery. Buried deep within the Wi-Fi network's source code was a secondary encrypted data stream. It was a secret channel, designed to transmit data not out to the wider web, but to a specific local receiver somewhere else within the same building. The loft's Wi-Fi was a surveillance tool. In the final lines of code Alex wrote, he had embedded a comment, a reference to a specific type of network intrusion. Alex had found the secret channel. He knew he was being watched. He was a guest who learned too much, and for that he was erased. The apartment is still listed for rent today. This story is about a family, the Hendersons. They booked a week-long stay in a large modern beach house. The trouble began subtly on the second afternoon. Sarah was in the kitchen, but for a fleeting second she saw something else. A tall, dark shape standing near the edge of the waves. She blinked and it was gone. She dismissed it as a trick of the light. That evening, Tom saw it too. He saw a shadow move across the glass. The following morning, their 7-year-old son said he had seen a shadow man in his room during the night. The sightings became more frequent. Then came the cold spots, a pocket of intense, unnatural cold. The next morning erased doubt. On the light wooden floor were footprints made of condensation. The shadows were no longer content to watch. They were now walking among them. Our final story takes us to the rolling hills of the English countryside, a centuries-old thatched roof cottage. They imagined a home filled with the character and memories of a long life. It felt like Eleanor had just stepped out for a moment. The strange occurrences began on their second day. Strange, but not yet frightening. It felt less like a threat and more like a gentle suggestion. That night, they heard a faint melodic humming, coming from the downstairs living room. The most unnerving incident happened the next morning. They woke to find a single, perfect white rose lying on the pillow between them. Liam and Chloe were thoroughly spooked. They decided to leave immediately. As Chloe was gathering their things, she noticed the small writing desk. It was a handwritten note. "Please look after my garden. Don't let them forget me." It was signed, Eleanor. A profound, chilling realization washed over them. They weren't random acts, they were attempts to communicate. Eleanor wasn't trying to scare them, she was trying to ask for help. They went out into the overgrown garden. They spent an hour pulling weeds, a final gesture of respect for the host they had never met. As they finally drove away, she thought she saw the faint silhouette of an elderly woman standing in the upstairs window, a silent figure, perhaps finally at peace. We have journeyed through the shadows of the shared economy. We have peeked behind the closed doors of seemingly perfect rentals and found the unsettling truths. They remind us that the history of a place, its secrets and its sorrows, do not simply vanish when a new guest arrives. The walls remember. A hidden room, a message on a mirror, a guest who vanishes without a trace. They are the unseen hosts, the permanent residents waiting for the next unsuspecting traveller to turn the key. They were left with indelible scars and the chilling knowledge the world is not always as it seems. Questions with no answers, mysteries that fester long after the vacation ends. One final, haunting question to carry into the night. The next time you find yourself in an unfamiliar room, in a stranger's house, after you've unpacked and locked the door, when the only sound is your heartbeat in the dark, how can you be certain the story of the house is finished, or have you just become the next chapter?